In an era often characterized by shifting loyalties and pragmatic opportunism, Abraham Lincoln stood as a towering anomaly. His integrity wasn't a calculated political strategy. It was the very bedrock of his being, forged through early experiences, and cemented by an unwavering internal compass. This unwavering commitment to what was right, regardless of personal cost, defined his first two ethical principles. Ethical principle number 1, unyielding honesty, the Honest Abe legacy. The moniker. Honest Abe wasn't a campaign slogan invented by a clever press agent. It was a deeply ingrained reputation earned through years of consistent action. It stemmed from his early life on the frontier, where a person's word was their bond, and reputation meant everything. Lincoln understood that true power didn't come from deception or manipulation, but from absolute trustworthiness. Consider the tales from his time as a young store clerk in New Salem, Illinois. These anecdotes, though sometimes romanticized, illustrate a profound commitment to fairness that went beyond mere customer service. One story recounts how, after closing his store for the night, Lincoln discovered he had overcharged a customer by a few cents. Despite the long walk back in the dark, he promptly walked miles to return the small sum. Another time he realized he'd given a customer a few ounces less tea than paid for. He immediately weighed out the correct amount and delivered it personally. These weren't grand gestures on a national stage. They were small, everyday actions that, when repeated consistently, built an unshakable reputation. For Lincoln, honesty wasn't just about avoiding lies. It was about precision in transaction, meticulous fairness, and an absolute refusal to benefit even marginally from someone else's disadvantage. This level of integrity stood out dramatically. In a world where sharp dealing was common, Lincoln's unyielding commitment to exactness in business, no matter how trivial the amount, marked him as different. This principle translated directly into his legal career. As a lawyer, Lincoln wasn't known for winning cases through clever tricks or exploiting loopholes. Instead, he gained respect for his fairness and his insistence on dealing with the truth. He famously advised clients that he wouldn't take a case unless he believed it was just. If he found during a case that his client was in the wrong, he might even withdraw. His ethical standard was clear. An honest lawyer can never make the issue when it is doubtful. This commitment to honesty built an extraordinary level of trust, which is a rare and invaluable currency. People knew that when Lincoln spoke, he spoke his truth, even if it was inconvenient or unpopular. This authenticity gave his words immense weight. It meant his arguments weren't just logically sound, they were morally credible. In a world where leaders often twisted facts to suit their narratives, Lincoln's honesty became his most powerful weapon, not for attack, but for genuine connection and persuasion. He taught us that integrity is not merely an absence of falsehood, but an active pursuit of truth and fairness in every interaction, no matter how small. This consistent, unwavering dedication ultimately laid the foundation for his ability to lead a nation through its greatest moral crisis. Ethical principle. Number 2, unwavering fair dealing, justice beyond the letter of the law. Beyond simple honesty, Lincoln possessed a profound commitment to fair dealing, a principle that extended beyond mere adherence to rules or laws. It was about ensuring true justice and equity, especially for those who might be disadvantaged. This wasn't a detached intellectual concept for him. It was deeply personal, rooted in his frontier experiences where the strong often preyed on the weak and where a sense of community fairness was essential for survival. This principle was particularly evident in his legal practice. Lincoln often found himself representing ordinary people, farmers, laborers, small business owners, against larger, more powerful interests. While he respected the law, he also understood its potential to be manipulated. He wasn't just interested in winning, he was interested in justice. He was known to advise clients against bringing lawsuits he considered unjust, even turning down profitable cases. He famously told a colleague, "Yes, we can doubtless gain your case for you, But I cannot do it. All the money in the world would not induce me to do a wrong thing. Consider his approach to settling disputes outside the courtroom. Lincoln was often lauded for his ability to mediate conflicts, finding resolutions that satisfied both parties without resorting to lengthy, costly legal battles. He understood that a win in court might still leave bitterness and resentment. A truly fair resolution, one where both sides felt their concerns were heard and respected, was far more valuable for fostering lasting harmony. He would often advise clients to compromise, discourage litigation, persuade your neighbors to compromise whenever you can. Point out to them how the nominal winner is often a real loser in fees, expenses, and waste of time. This wasn't about legal strategy. It was about a deeply ingrained ethical principle of fairness and community well-being. This principle of fair dealing also shaped his approach to public service. Even in the rough-and-tumble world of politics, where personal attacks and smear campaigns were common, Lincoln largely refused to engage in such tactics. He debated issues, not personalities. He sought to understand his opponent's arguments rather than merely demonize them. He believed that even adversaries deserved to be treated with a fundamental level of respect and intellectual honesty. This made his arguments more persuasive because they transcended petty squabbles and aimed for a higher common ground. Lincoln's commitment to fair dealing was fundamentally about recognizing the inherent dignity of every individual, regardless of their status or their alignment with his views. It was about applying principles of equity, not just legality, to every decision. This ethical stance provided him with immense moral authority, allowing him to lead a diverse and often warring populace. He taught us that true leadership isn't just about wielding power, but about consistently wielding it with a profound sense of justice and an unwavering commitment to treating everyone with dignity. This ethical bedrock enabled him to build bridges, foster trust, and ultimately lay the groundwork for national healing. Ethical principle number 3, radical personal accountability, owning every outcome. For Lincoln, leadership wasn't about assigning blame or deflecting criticism. It was about taking radical personal accountability for outcomes, especially failures. He understood that a leader's credibility wasn't built on being infallible, but on being responsible. This principle was hammered into him early, perhaps in the unforgiving environment of the frontier, where consequences for actions or inactions were immediate and often harsh. In his early business ventures, Lincoln experienced financial failure, notably the collapse of his store in New Salem. This wasn't a minor setback. It left him with a significant debt, often referred to as the national debt of his personal finances. Unlike many who might declare bankruptcy or try to evade their obligations, Lincoln spent years meticulously working to repay every cent. This wasn't just about legal obligation. It was about a deep-seated ethical commitment to owning his financial outcomes. He didn't rationalize or externalize the blame. He simply bore the burden and worked to rectify it. This ingrained habit of personal responsibility for financial promises, no matter how difficult, became a defining characteristic of his integrity. This principle scaled dramatically when he assumed the presidency during the Civil War. The weight of the nation's survival, the unimaginable casualties, and the constant stream of criticism could have crushed a lesser leader. Yet, Lincoln rarely publicly blamed his generals, his cabinet, or even the opposing side for specific setbacks. When the Union Army suffered a devastating defeat or a strategic plan went awry, Lincoln didn't issue pronouncements scapegoating others. Instead, his private laments often reflected a profound sense of personal burden and responsibility. He would often say, "I am the President of the United States, and I am responsible for these men." Consider his approach to issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. This was a monumental decision, fraught with immense political and military risk. While he consulted widely, Lincoln ultimately took full, undeniable ownership of the proclamation. He didn't say, "My cabinet advised me," or "the generals demanded it." He simply stated, "I never in my life felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper." If my name ever goes into history, it will be for this act, and my whole soul is in it. This declaration wasn't just conviction. It was absolute accountability. He implicitly put his reputation and legacy on the line for the righteousness of the act. Lincoln's radical personal accountability wasn't about grand self-flagellation. It was about a quiet, powerful understanding that the buck stopped with him. This ethical stance cultivated immense trust because people saw a leader who didn't shy away from the consequences of command. It taught us that true strength in leadership and in life comes not from avoiding mistakes, but from fully owning them and working tirelessly to make things right. When you assume full responsibility, you project an integrity that transcends individual errors and builds a foundation of unshakable reliability. Ethical principle number 4, profound humility, leading without ego. In an age when self-aggrandizement was common among public figures, Lincoln's profound humility was striking. He never postured, never sought personal glory, and consistently downplayed his own contributions, even as he bore the heaviest burdens. This was not false modesty. It was an authentic recognition of his place in the larger scheme of things, and a deep understanding that the cause was always greater than the individual. His humble beginnings, often described as a source of his common touch, were more than just a narrative. They instilled in him a genuine lack of pretension. He remained approachable to ordinary citizens, often engaging in direct, unfiltered conversations that would be unthinkable for a head of state. Today, he didn't put on airs or demand deference. This humility fostered a powerful connection with the American people, who saw in him not a distant, imperious leader, but one of their own, wrestling with immense challenges. In his famous Gettysburg Address, a speech now considered one of the most powerful in American history, Lincoln's humility is profoundly evident. He deliberately downplayed the significance of his own words. "The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here." He redirected all glory from the orator himself to the soldiers who had sacrificed their lives. This wasn't a calculated rhetorical trick. It was a genuine expression of his belief that the actions of the common soldier and the overarching cause of freedom far outshone any speech or individual. Similarly, in his interactions with his military generals, Lincoln's humility allowed him to listen, learn, and even defer when appropriate, despite being the commander-in-chief. He sought advice from various sources, never assuming his own knowledge was supreme. He would patiently explain his reasoning. But if a general had a compelling counter-argument, Lincoln was capable of changing his mind or deferring to expert judgment. This lack of ego allowed him to gather the best advice, make better decisions, and build a more effective team, even with generals who often frustrated him. Perhaps most tellingly, Lincoln often used self-deprecating humor. When criticized for his plain appearance, he might joke about it himself. This disarmed critics and endeared him to the public. It showed a man secure enough in his own identity not to be wounded by superficial attacks. His humility made him relatable and trustworthy. He taught us that true leadership isn't about projecting an image of invincibility, but about acknowledging one's humanity, one's limitations, and the ultimate supremacy of the greater cause. When leaders are humble, they invite trust, foster collaboration, and ultimately inspire a deeper loyalty than any display of arrogance ever could. Their integrity shines through, not in how much they claim, but in how little they demand for themselves. Ethical principle number 5, unyielding courage of conviction, standing firm for what's right. In the tumultuous political landscape of his era, shifting positions for political expediency was common. Yet Lincoln possessed an unyielding courage of conviction, a deep-seated commitment to moral principles that he refused to abandon, even when it meant facing immense opposition, political isolation, or personal danger. This wasn't stubbornness. It was a principled steadfastness rooted in his belief that certain truths were non-negotiable. His consistent stance against the expansion of slavery, even before the war, exemplifies this principle. While many politicians sought compromise that would allow slavery to spread, Lincoln repeatedly and eloquently argued against it, rooted in his belief that it was a moral wrong incompatible with the nation's founding ideals. In his House Divided speech 1858, he boldly stated, "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free." This was a prophetic declaration that alienated many compromisers and even some supporters who feared its radical implications. Yet Lincoln refused to backtrack, knowing that the moral truth of the issue was paramount. He was willing to sacrifice political popularity for principled consistency. This courage intensified during the Civil War. Despite constant pressure from various factions, abolitionists demanding immediate and total freedom, conservatives urging restraint, and generals clamoring for different strategies, Lincoln remained steadfast in his twin goals, preserving the Union and ultimately abolishing slavery. Issuing the Emancipation Proclamation was perhaps the ultimate act of this courage. It was a decision fraught with immense risks, potentially alienating border states, undermining military morale, and inciting slave revolutions. Yet Lincoln moved forward, convinced that it was a military necessity and a moral right. He told his cabinet, "I have got you, gentlemen, a paper that I have written, and I have not called you together to ask your advice, but to hear what I have written." This wasn't arrogance. It was the courage of a conviction so deep that he was prepared to stand alone against the storm. Lincoln's courage wasn't about physical bravery on a battlefield. It was about the moral fortitude to hold fast to his beliefs when the entire world seemed to be pulling in different directions. He understood that a leader's integrity is most tested not in moments of ease, but when adhering to principles demands immense personal and political cost. He taught us that true conviction isn't just believing in something. It's being willing to endure the consequences of acting on that belief, proving that consistency in principle is a hallmark of authentic leadership. Ethical. Principle number 6. Boundless. Compassion. Charity for all, even adversaries. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of Lincoln's ethical framework, especially given the brutality of the Civil War, was his boundless compassion, his remarkable capacity for empathy, forgiveness, and charity, even towards those who sought to destroy the nation he led. This wasn't weakness. It was a profound strength, rooted in his understanding of shared humanity and his vision for a future of reconciliation. Throughout the war, while others clamored for vengeance and harsh retribution against the Southern states, Lincoln consistently advocated for a lenient and healing approach. His famous phrase, "With malice toward none, with charity for all," from his second inaugural address, 1865, epitomizes this principle. Delivered at a time when the Union's victory was certain and the desire for punishment was strong, Lincoln instead spoke of shared suffering, divine judgment on both sides, and the imperative for national healing. He refused to gloat or demonize the defeated. This was an ethical call for a radical act of forgiveness, aimed not just at winning the war, but at winning the peace. His compassion also extended to individual soldiers. He was notoriously lenient in approving death sentences for deserters or those accused of minor infractions, often saying he couldn't sign away a life simply for policy. He showed immense empathy for the personal suffering caused by the war, often visiting hospitals and speaking directly with wounded soldiers from both sides. When asked how he would treat the defeated Confederates after the war, he famously responded, "I shall treat them as if they had never been away." This wasn't merely a political strategy. It was an expression of a deep ethical commitment to seeing former enemies as future fellow citizens, deserving of forgiveness and reintegration. This boundless compassion allowed Lincoln to transcend the immediate bitterness of conflict and look towards a unified future. He understood that lasting peace could not be built on a foundation of vengeance, but only on reconciliation. His ethical principle of charity for all was a revolutionary act of leadership, demonstrating that even in the face of profound hurt Extending understanding and forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but of profound moral strength. He taught us that the greatest leaders aren't those who punish most severely, but those who find the capacity to forgive most completely, thereby creating the conditions for true healing and progress. Ethical principle number 7, the foresight of principled action, playing the long game for justice. Lincoln's ethical framework wasn't just about reacting rightly in the moment. It was about acting with a foresight of principled action, understanding that some moral victories required careful cultivation and strategic timing. He played the long game, even when public opinion or political pressures demanded immediate, often impulsive solutions. This was a testament to his deep conviction that certain moral outcomes were inevitable, given enough perseverance and principled effort. His approach to the abolition of slavery is the clearest manifestation of this principle. While personally abhorring slavery from an early age, Lincoln understood that a frontal, immediate assault on the institution would likely fracture the Union irrevocably before any true change could occur. Instead, he systematically laid the groundwork, first by opposing its expansion into new territories, then by framing the war as a fight for union, and finally, by issuing the Emancipation Proclamation when it became a military necessity and had gained sufficient moral and political support. This wasn't a compromise of principle. It was a strategic deployment of principle, understanding the complex political and social landscape. Consider the immense pressure he faced to issue the Emancipation Proclamation earlier. Abolitionists clamored for it. Many allies criticized his perceived slowness. Yet Lincoln waited for the right moment, a Union victory antietam that would give the proclamation military weight and prevent it from appearing as an act of desperation. He also navigated the delicate balance of keeping the crucial border states, slave states that remained in the Union, loyal. His foresight allowed him to see the end goal, abolition, and patiently work towards it through a series of carefully timed, principled actions, rather than rushing into a moral declaration that might have backfired catastrophically. This long-game approach also extended to his vision for Reconstruction. Even as the war raged, Lincoln was already thinking about how to reintegrate the Confederate States with malice toward none. He understood that a just and lasting peace required more than military victory. It required a thoughtful, magnanimous plan for reunification. His proposed 10% plan for readmitting Southern states was a testament to this foresight, aiming for swift healing rather than prolonged punishment, all rooted in his ethical commitment to a truly unified nation. He could envision a future where former enemies could once again be fellow citizens, and his actions were geared towards that ultimate ethical outcome. Lincoln's foresight of principled action teaches us that true integrity sometimes requires immense patience and strategic wisdom. It's about maintaining a clear moral compass while understanding the complex realities of implementation. It's about not just doing what is right, but doing what is right at the right time, ensuring that the principled path leads to the most effective and lasting positive change. It's the ethical leader's ability to see beyond the immediate horizon and guide actions towards a future of greater justice. The cumulative impact, a life defined by unshakable integrity. Lincoln's ethical principles weren't isolated virtues. They were interconnected facets of a deeply integrated character. His honesty made his logic persuasive, his humility allowed, his compassion to shine without condescension. His accountability strengthened his courage of conviction. Each principle reinforced the others, creating a leader whose integrity was not merely a desirable trait, but the very source of his power and his lasting influence. In a world prone to cynicism, Lincoln's life stands as a testament to the profound impact of consistently living by a strong ethical code. His journey from humble origins to the presidency was marked not by moral compromises, but by an unwavering commitment to truth, justice, and humanity. He faced unimaginable pressures, the weight of a nation divided, and the constant threat of personal and political ruin. Yet through it all, he remained Honest Abe, a man whose word was his bond, whose decisions were guided by a higher moral purpose, and whose compassion extended even to those who sought his downfall. Consider the sheer scale of the challenges he faced: a nation tearing itself apart, the moral stain of slavery, immense personal tragedy. In moments of such profound crisis, true character is revealed. Lincoln's response was never to abandon his principles for expedience, but to find ways to apply those principles with courage, wisdom, and empathy. He didn't just govern, he modeled ethical leadership through every action and every word. The cumulative impact of his 7 ethical principles is evident in his enduring legacy. He united a nation, not just through military force, but through moral persuasion and a vision of shared humanity. He redefined freedom, elevating the struggle for union into a fight for universal equality and dignity. He set a standard for leadership, proving that the most effective leaders are those who lead with integrity, humility, and compassion. He offered a blueprint for reconciliation, showing that even after devastating conflict, healing and forgiveness are possible. Lincoln's life teaches us that building a life of integrity is a continuous process, forged in everyday choices and tested in moments of crisis. It's about being truthful, always, even when inconvenient, acting fairly, seeing beyond personal gain to true justice, owning your mistakes, accepting responsibility without blame, practicing humility, recognizing that the cause is greater than ego, standing firm in your convictions, even when facing immense opposition, extending compassion and forgiveness, especially when it's difficult, playing the long game for what's right with foresight and patience. His ethical principles are not abstract historical concepts. They are living, breathing guides for anyone seeking to lead with purpose, live with honor, and make a positive impact in their own lives and communities. Lincoln's integrity wasn't just a political advantage. It was a profound testament to the power of a life lived by unwavering values. He showed us that the true measure of a leader, and indeed of any person, lies not in the power they accumulate, but in the unwavering integrity with which they wield it, leaving behind a legacy that inspires generations to strive for a more just and compassionate world.